the big data as a whole is already impacting the way organizations work, and the effect of that change has become very evident in our day-to-day lives, and we see it more every day and every year that passes by. Today we've got access to things like machine learning, we've got artificial intelligence, we've got cognitive analytics. All these things used to be academic discussions, but they're no longer theory. They technologies that we have access to, both in a business context as well as the end consumers. So advanced algorithms are being used by organizations like Walmart, where they, at any given time, they're able to predict what stock goes to which store, depending on what the weather patterns. And this isn't just led by them. You've got other organizations like Avis Budget that used IoT or big data as a way to enhance themselves and change their strategy. This is an organization that, during the midst of the recession in 2008, 2009, in a company for all intents and purposes that traded in commodity, decided that instead of sitting and riding out the storm, what they'd do is they'd use that opportunity as a way of revisiting their strategy and setting themselves up for the future. And they used customer information and they used analytics as a mechanism to do that. What they had was 40 million customers across 160 countries. And what they decided to do was do the analytics. And what the data told them is that they had a real opportunity to build a relationship with their customers. What they had was the life value of 40 million people. And what they were able to do was change their behavior in order to reach the expectation of the customer. The initiatives that followed this initiative itself netted them close to 200 million in net new revenue. There are many other examples where organizations have used big data and had success stories. Has anyone ever heard of a chap by the name of Ross Compton? So Ross is an individual that what he did is he sat back and he watched his house burn down to the ground, and he had absolutely no motivation whatsoever to set this house on fire. Now, what Ross claimed is that he saw the fire. He decided to go into his house, take a couple of belongings. He broke the window with his cane. He took out his belongings, took them to the car, and just sat there and got out by the nick of time. What Ross wasn't counting on is that his pacemaker was generating the data that 2 weeks later would have him arrested for insurance fraud and arson. So bad story for Ross, but pretty nice for the insurance companies who didn't have to pay out their claim. So big data is helping organizations. In the past 2 years, we know that more data has been generated than in the history of the human race. In the next 3 years, it's anticipated that 1.7 megabytes of data will be generated for every second for every human on the face of the planet. So it's clear that the goal is to find ourselves in a position where we're able to extract that information and we're able to use that information to make intelligent decisions. Today, what we'd like to talk to you about is the practical implication of that, and what we're very aware that a lot of these systems that organizations have in their arsenal today are legacy. And what we'd like to talk about is how you're able to bring all these different systems together, and after that we'd like to give you a practical demonstration of how that could be achieved. So the Internet of Things, or also referred to as the fourth industrial revolution. If big data is the engine, then IoT will be the framework that collects the information, that aggregates it, and gives it to the big data engines in order to perform the analysis. There are 100 success stories so far as IoT is concerned. We have stories where livestock have got live sensors on them, and what they do is they test the vitals of that particular animal. And if we have a pregnant cow, for argument's sake, we'll be able to predict exactly when that cow is going to give birth. Not only just saving time, but also unnecessary call-out vets, or call-outs so far as the vets are concerned. The first industrial revolution, and we're not going to go through all of them, but just so we we can see the impact that these have had in the past, used steam power to mechanize production. So back in the 1800s, what you'd find is a handheld spinning machine could generate or could produce 100 pounds of cotton, and this would take them roughly 50,000 hours. When steam engines or steam power was introduced back in 1970, you would be able to produce the same amount of cotton, but you'd be able to do it in 300 hours. 30 years later, you could be doing the same amount for 135 hours by a single individual. The second revolution was where you put the intelligence inside the tool, or the skill at least inside the tool, and we used electricity to create mass production. The same type of scenario where Thomas Edison's steel ore processing plant would be able to process 20 tons of ore in a single day, where decades prior, a mechanized canal digger was able to do a total of 5. So the fourth industrial revolution is referred to the fusion of technologies that blur the lines between digital, biological, and physical. And not to trivialize how great it is to have a fridge that can tell you that you're out of milk, but I mean, if one really thinks about the impact that that type of technology will have to us in a social and in a business context, if you look at across the industries from a healthcare perspective, we're able to do real life monitoring and diagnosing of health patients. If you look at it from a security point of view, and I'm not just referring to cybersecurity, I'm talking about what can be done from physical security, surveillance, tracking, the things that impact us back home. It's clear that opportunities will be created using this technology. The caveat, however, is that one of the biggest challenges we have is not the ability to pull data from devices in isolation. It's the ability to be able to pull these data from all these different sources and combine them, that we're able to cross-reference them with one another and have a complete picture as opposed to looking at these things in silos. So at the base, it's really just about data. IoT and big data are two sides of the same coin. IoT goes out and collects the data. This is analyzed, and decisions are made out of it, and ultimately the IoT acts upon it. And it's that ever accelerating loop that's driven by business that is accelerating both the need for IoT as well as big data. Capgemini did a report where they interviewed a number of executives, and only 27% of those came out that said that their big data initiatives were successful. They say that the primary reason for this was that you've got aggregated or you've got dispersed data silos. And what's clear to me on that is that there's still a very big disconnect between the theoretical side of big data and IoT and the practical implication of that. Bringing the gap together is key. How do we get analog to speak to digital? How do we get legacy to speak to cutting edge? And how do we get old traditional to talk to the new technologies? IoT is about data, and it's not about things. And if we had a look at what steps we can take to try and close that gap, the first one would be the data integration is essential. So what we're essentially saying over there is that we're looking for a mechanism to be able to extract this data across all these different sources, but data that we can trust, as opposed to retrospectively having to go back and try clean up that data. Folks say that in the majority of time, so far as analysts are concerned, is cleaning up data and spending less time on actually looking at it. So when starting off your IoT initiatives, the idea is to keep data integration and governance in mind from the start. The next would be cutting edge. So what we're essentially saying there is that, well, let me give you a practical example. So if I had a heart rate monitor or a wristband of some sort, and what it was doing is testing or checking on my vitals, for any anomalies to be picked up, I would hate to be in a situation where that information first has to be processed in a large data center, before I get any type of results back. I would hate this thing to come back and tell me that I'm about to have a heart attack 10 minutes ago. It's incredibly inefficient. By having some type of edge device that's able to pick up that anomaly on the edge, where it normally resides on the edge of a network or on the service provider's point of presence, it's able to pick it up instantaneously, and it's able to diagnose and kick off action straight away. The last one would be use data abstraction, and by that, what we're essentially saying is we separate the layer between the complexity and it masks complexity. So when we have a very stable infrastructure underneath or stable applications, any type of work that's done on that, we're able to extract the vital information that we're trying to use to make educated decisions on. The challenge is the challenge that we have today is ultimately we need to unlock business or business value. We've mentioned that IoT and big data are pretty much the two sides of the same coin. The IoT collects that data. This is analyzed by the big data engines, and ultimately the IoT acts back on it. The challenge is not getting that data from these devices in isolation, as we mentioned. The challenge is to be able to bridge the gap between the digital and analog devices, being able to bridge the gap between the new age, cutting edge technologies and what we already have inside our infrastructure. Right, so like the rest of us, we've been installing technology into our organizations for the last 10 to 15 years, and a lot of this technology still has a life cycle of an additional 10. So what we're left with is we have to find a mechanism to retrofit that environment, and we need to be able to do it seamlessly. So OEMs will try and lock organizations into their specific technologies. They doesn't give you the opportunity to implement new tech quickly, and it certainly doesn't give you the opportunity to select best of breeds. The same applies with enterprise platforms. You're locked into a specific OEM, you're locked into a specific technology. And in a world where we have choice between OEM, the transport mechanism, the way we the platform in which we store it, and the cloud provider, we should be given the opportunity to select the best of breed technologies and use them in the best way to extract the valuable information that we require to use that information and apply it in a world that is very relevant to us.